Everyone is hooked. If it wasn't for Miguel literally pulling up all the way from Africa, even Ui Ui would have been dead by now. Gojo, Kashimo, Hiruguma, then Yuta. Many sorcerers who represented the peak of sorcery have stood before Sukuna during this arc, but all of them have failed. Even Maki, who was able to excite him, barely lasted a few panels. Guys, as of chapter 254, the only ones who have yet to fight Sukuna are Hakari, Mei, and Miguel. Everyone else has already tried and lost. Just what is the endgame here? Did anyone plan for this? Just what the hell is Geigi cooking? This somehow gets worse when you realize that the gang had already accounted for pretty much anything that could happen. They had a plan for everything, even when Gojo died, and then Kashimo died, and then Higuruma died, and then Yuta's domain broke. There was always the next step in the plan. I mean, the idea that Maki was there to pull off a sneak attack right as Yuta's domain broke is already 4D chess. But with chapter 254, I believe that things may have changed. The main characters have clearly tried everything, but they have continued to fail, and we have reached a point in the story where things are no longer going according to the plan. Which makes you wonder if there is still a way to defeat Sukuna. What can we expect at this point? Chapter 254 was literally about the strongest sorcerer in history versus the strongest sorcerer available, but even Kusakabe, the available one, barely lasted a chapter. Of course, Miguel is here and his arrival was not something many of us expected, but I get the feeling that he may suffer the same kind of fate as Kashimo. It's also rather interesting how the editor notes at the end of chapter 254 referred to Miguel as the man who went toe-to-toe with Gojo Satoru. Yeah, I'm not sure how that's going to go. Miguel is probably quite strong considering how he was able to stall Gojo Satoru, but let's not forget that he used up all of his black robe during that fight. Even when Yuta went all the way to Africa to ask for some more, there was none. Though I'd imagine he has a plan though. He obviously knew what was going on. That's why he was able to pull up in time and save Ui Ui. Wait, what if Sukuna is only the strongest sorcerer in Japanese history? I mean, he did tell Sukuna that he needs to expand his horizons. Unfortunately, we know for a fact that Miguel won't be the one who defeats Sukuna. It's impossible, which means that he will probably just stall Sukuna for long enough that Yuta, Choso, and hopefully Yuta can return to the fight. We're likely going to get a scenario where Megumi and Yuji defeat Sukuna together, but man, is that going to take an awful lot to get to that point. Sukuna took Megumi's soul. His willpower is in pieces. It's like, what's the point? Megumi has completely lost his will to live. Yes, when it comes to shonen anime, the main character always makes a comeback at the end, but I don't know guys, this is Jujutsu Kaisen. Gegyo Akutami sensei does not care about the rules. He has probably wasted all of the plot armor stocks on Sukuna at this point. I mean, let's try to recap what has happened since Gojo's fight with Sukuna. Gojo died in chapter 236, but thanks to him, Sukuna has been unable to use his domain expansion ever since. Sukuna then fights Kashimo, but even with his kamikaze attempt, Kashimo is unable to do anything to Sukuna. The fight only lasts 2 chapters. At the end of chapter 238, Higuruma and Yuji enter the chat. The next 5 chapters are about Kenjaku. He fights Sakaba and is ultimately killed by Yuta, and we cut back to Sukuna in chapter 244. Higuruma's domain expansion takes us to the courts. In chapter 245, Sukuna pleads guilty to the Shibuya massacre and is given the death penalty. Of course, the penalty still needs to be carried out by the executioner's sword, and this is where Choso, Kusakabe, and even Takuma join the battle to contain Sukuna so that Higuruma can take the king's life with his executioner's sword. But as we see in chapter 247, Higuruma is also killed. To be honest, I won't be surprised if the exact same thing happens to Miguel. In chapter 246, Higuruma is portrayed as the man with talent equal to that of Gojo Satoru, but in chapter 247, he is killed. Now, in chapter 254, Miguel is referred to as the one who went toe-to-toe with Gojo Satoru. And guys, if the chapter is already out by the time you get to watch this video, make sure you comment down on what became of our brother Miguel. Going back to the Sukuna grinder, Megumi gains the authority to activate the merger in chapter 248. Obviously also means that Sukuna has gained that authority. He declares that he is going to kill them all, and then he's going to kill all the other players, and finally, he's going to have some fun with Tengen. Yuta also arrives with Eureka in the same chapter, and in chapter 249, we finally see it. Yuta's domain expansion, authentic mutual love. And it's a pretty badass domain expansion to be honest. It allows Yuta to spam his copied curse techniques without any restrictions. Next, in chapter 250, Yuta copies Sukuna's cleave technique. In chapter 251, he uses Jacob's ladder, nullifies any and all of techniques Sukuna could use. This allows Yuji to access the barrier of Megumi and Sukuna's soul. This was the chance. This is where they could break Megumi out of there. But as we know, Megumi was already done. The Jacob's ladder fades away, and Sukuna just straight up slices through Yuta, Rika, and also Yuji to some extent. The domain collapses, and as we talked about before, the gang has somehow planned for this too because Maki was right there to stab Sukuna with the split soul katana. Sukuna vs. Maki starts in chapter 252, and we also learn from Urame that Sukuna is still not fighting seriously. I mean, come on. It does make sense though. Sukuna is no longer fighting Gojo. How can we expect him to take it seriously? Although in chapter 253, he gets oddly excited against Maki, but she also only lasts a few panels as well. This takes us to the whole strongest sorcerer in history versus the strongest sorcerer available meme. Yep, Sukuna versus Kusakabe. But as I saw in chapter 254, it didn't matter how much he spammed those simple domains, Kusakabe just couldn't last against Sukuna either. So far, it has been a carnage. Gojo, Kashimo, and Higuruma are all dead. Yuji, Yuta, Choso, and Maki were brutally mauled. I'm not sure about Kusakabe's fate, but considering the way that the chapter was structured, it is pretty clear that he's done. Well, we'll wait and see. Going back to the question, now that the situation is worse than ever, who is still strong enough to defeat Sukuna? If we're optimistic, we can't assume that Yuta and Maki will be available for another round. Usually goes without saying, and Choso is in pretty good condition too. I'm not sure if Mei would be up to the challenge. If Japan gets cooked, she is definitely flying to Vegas on some private jet or something. However, what if Ui gets in danger again? Would Mei enter the chat for a little brother? And what about characters like Todo and Unumaki? If a guy from Africa can show up to fight for the good guys, I can see no reason why Todo and Unumaki can't show up. Maybe not Todo since he literally can't use his curse technique anymore or his energy, but Unumaki only lost an arm, right? I'd like to bet on Hikari, but it's only been so long and his battle with Urame has barely progressed. For now, our best bet is to have Miguel stall Sukuna for as long as he can, so the characters like Yuta, Yuji, Maki, and Choso can come back with another plan. Overall, things are looking pretty bleak. Sukuna is like the model of Jujutsu Kaisen, but even if he gets impaled from behind, he can still flip the situation in his favor. But what's with the off-screening? All the fights with Sukuna just suddenly end. What's with that? Though as we talked about at the beginning of the video, the story is going to freestyle from here on out. The gang has already exhausted their options. They won't be able to catch Sukuna off guard again. They no longer have the advantage and their numbers have been thinned out. Who knows? Maybe that one YouTube comment was right. Maybe there is a Chinese sorcerer who was never seen but was mentioned to be feared by Sukuna. I mean, can Sukuna beat Goku though? Goku is based after Sun Wukong. Sukuna's enlightenment theme is based off the Buddha. I think there is a matchup to be had. Alright, enough with the schizo theorizing. Let's lay down the few facts that we have. We know that Megumi is still alive within Sukuna. We also know that Yuta and Maki are not dead. And let me remind you that Yuji has only played support roles during all of the fights he has been involved in throughout this arc. We still don't know the full extent of what he can do. Speaking of which, we also don't know the full extent of what Miguel can do either. Does he have a domain expansion? Maybe a unique technique? Since he can't use the black rope, he must have at least had something, right? Let's not forget that it was Miguel who taught Yuta how to understand his insane cursed energy. Thinking about it now, we've actually not seen much from him. The only time we saw him fight was against Gojo Satoru. Gojo was clearly pleased with Miguel's performance because he literally sends Yuta to Africa to train with him. Honestly, it'll be a little sad if he also suffers the Sukuna challenge cycle treatment. Come on, Gege, let the guy stick around for just at least a little while. Ultimately, Megumi will have to return to the story at some point and kick Sukuna out of his body, because otherwise, the world of Jujutsu Kaisen is cooked. The authority to kickstart the merger is in the hands of Megumi's body, which means he'll also have to be the one who would stop it from happening. Besides, we also know that Gojo entrusted Shoko with telling Megumi the truth about his father. So yes, Yuji will have to hit Megumi with that Todo Cross Erwin speech combo, and the two of them will be the ones who take down Sukuna. That seems like the only way to end the story on a satisfying note. But let me know what you guys think. What do you think of the Shinjuku Showdown arc so far? Do you agree that Gege has just straight up given Sukuna the pass to do whatever he wants? Do you think that Miguel will have a domain expansion? Will Itadori Yuji develop his own domain expansion? Will Megumi find the will to live? I guess we'll find out in the next few chapters of Sukuna's bizarre adventure. It's natural for a manga to get more and more controversial the closer it gets to the ending, but it's even more rare for an author to treat his main character so poorly. Sometimes this annoys you, but also makes you wonder what Geki has in store for them. Like, when is all of this said and done, what would have become of Yuji and Megumi? Come on guys, let's continue this conversation in the comment section down below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. It's always appreciated. Again, my name is TK, loving us some anime. Well then, with that said, I'll see you on the next video.
挽回千本桜影吉